The first thing they noticed was his shoes, split at the seams, powdered with dust, and soaked through as if they had walked 100 miles without rest. And the second thing they noticed was the way he stood in the doorway, straight-backed and calm, like a man who had already survived worse than laughter. In a room filled with polished desks, glass walls, and the low hum of money moving from one account to another, the ragged man looked like a mistake that had wandered in by accident. When he said he would take 5 Mercedes trucks, the laughter came fast and careless, the kind that assumes the story has already ended before it has begun. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us never to judge a soul by their clothes, please take a moment to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. The building stood on the edge of the city's industrial district, tall and reflective, its windows mirroring a sky that always seemed too distant for people who worked inside. Salesmen in crisp suits moved through the halls with practiced confidence, carrying tablets full of numbers that represented weight, steel, and profit. Trucks were sold here not just as machines, but as symbols of success, proof that a business had arrived. That morning had been slow, and boredom had sharpened their eyes, making the arrival of a man like him feel almost insulting. His jacket was threadbare, the elbows worn thin, and his beard looked like it had forgotten what a razor was. Yet his eyes were steady, dark, and oddly peaceful, as if he carried a map no one else could see. He had not always looked this way. Years earlier, those same streets had known him as a different man, one who drove his own trucks, who knew the weight of cargo and the smell of diesel at dawn. He had built his transport company from nothing but borrowed tools and relentless effort, sleeping in cabs and eating cold meals while routes expanded and contracts grew. But life, with its quiet cruelty, had taken everything in a single season. A flood destroyed his warehouse. A dishonest partner vanished with the insurance money. Debts multiplied faster than hope, and one by one, his trucks were seized, his accounts frozen, his name reduced to a warning whispered among lenders. When his wife fell ill soon after, the fall became unbearable. By the time the city moved on, he was left behind, a man with memories heavier than any cargo he had ever hauled. For years he drifted between day labor and nights spent under open skies, working where he could, saving coins that seemed to disappear as soon as they appeared. Pride, once his strongest armor, had thinned to something fragile. Yet even as his body grew tired and his clothes worn, his mind kept working, measuring distances, calculating risks, imagining roads that still existed somewhere beyond the present pain. He watched trucks pass on highways and felt something stir, not envy, but familiarity, like seeing an old friend across a crowded room. He knew those machines. He knew what they could do, and more importantly, what they could earn if used wisely. The opportunity came quietly. A logistics company collapsed under the weight of poor management, leaving behind contracts no one wanted because they seemed too risky. Routes ran through unstable regions, delivery windows were tight, and margins were thin. Most established companies turned away. But he saw something different. He saw patterns others missed, shortcuts born from experience, and a chance to rebuild without borrowing hope from anyone else. A small investor, impressed by his detailed plan scribbled on borrowed paper, agreed to back him, not with cash up front, but with a guarantee to cover initial leases if he could secure the trucks. 5 trucks, no more, no less. Enough to start again, enough to prove the plan worked. That was how he ended up standing in that showroom, surrounded by polished confidence and quiet disdain. The laughter did not wound him the way it might have once. He had been laughed at by storms, by empty bank accounts, by nights that seemed endless. This was nothing new. What mattered was that he remained calm, letting the sound pass through him like wind. He laid out his paperwork carefully, each document a testament to nights spent preparing instead of sleeping, to a mind that refused to surrender. The room grew quieter as signatures were examined, numbers checked, and a manager called in to confirm what no one expected to be true. When the approval came, it did not arrive with applause. It came with disbelief, followed by an uncomfortable silence that lingered as keys were placed on the desk. 5 Mercedes trucks, brand new, engines humming with potential. The ragged man did not smile widely or celebrate loudly. He simply nodded, as if greeting something inevitable. Outside, the sun broke through a veil of clouds, glinting off steel and glass, and for the first time in years, the future felt less like a wall and more like a road. The first months were brutal. He drove 1 truck himself while hiring 4 drivers willing to work for modest pay and shared belief. Routes were long, repairs frequent, and every delay threatened the fragile balance of cash flow. There were nights when exhaustion pressed so heavily on his chest that breathing felt like work. But each successful delivery built momentum. Clients who had been abandoned by larger firms found reliability in his operation. Word spread quietly, then faster, carried by results rather than promises. Payments arrived on time. Debts shrank. The trucks kept moving. Winter tested everything. Snow closed passes, fuel prices rose, and 1 truck broke down miles from the nearest service point. Standing in the cold beside that silent engine, he felt the old fear return, whispering that this was where it all ended again. But then help arrived in the form of a farmer who offered shelter, a mechanic who worked late into the night, and drivers who refused to quit. The truck rolled again by morning. That was when he understood that rebuilding was not a solitary act. It was a shared effort, bound by trust and perseverance. By the end of the year, the 5 trucks had paid for themselves and more. Contracts expanded. A small office replaced the roadside stops he once used to manage paperwork. He shaved, bought new clothes, and stood taller, not because he needed to impress anyone, but because the weight he carried had finally begun to lift. The city noticed him again, this time not as a warning, but as an example. People who had laughed now watched quietly as his company's logo became a familiar sight on highways and loading docks. One afternoon, he returned to the same building where laughter had once echoed. This time, the doors opened without hesitation. Faces that had looked past him now recognized him. He was there not to boast, but to sign an order for more trucks, expanding carefully, responsibly. As he waited, he glanced at the reflection in the glass and saw not just the man he had become, but all the versions of himself that had survived to make this moment possible. The flood, the betrayal, the nights of hunger, all of it had shaped the strength now standing there. Success did not erase the past, it transformed it. He started a small fund within his company to help drivers facing emergencies, remembering too well how quickly life could unravel. He hired people others overlooked, giving them the dignity of work and the patience to grow. His story spread, not as a legend of sudden wealth, but as a reminder that endurance often looks unremarkable until it changes everything. As this story draws close to its end, take a moment right now and comment below with the words, "Never judge." Your comment might be the reminder someone scrolling through needs today. Near the end of his journey, on a quiet evening when the yard was full of trucks resting after long routes, he sat alone and listened to the cooling engines. The sound was steady, reassuring, like a heartbeat. He thought about that first day, the laughter, the disbelief, and how close he had been to turning away. The biggest mistake they made was not laughing, it was assuming that struggle erased worth. They mistook worn clothes for a worn spirit, and in doing so, they missed the power of resilience standing right in front of them. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that hope can survive even the harshest seasons, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and stay connected by subscribing to the channel. Your engagement helps keep stories of quiet courage alive. The ragged man who asked for 5 Mercedes trucks did not just rebuild a business. He rebuilt belief, his own and that of everyone who learned his story. And long after the laughter faded, the sound that remained was the steady roll of wheels on open roads, carrying proof that sometimes the most underestimated beginnings lead to the strongest endings.